Lady Chatterley's Lover. Yes, a continuation story of Lady Chatterley's Lover with me, Morel Benard. Right, the last time I said that Constance hurried across the park and wasn't really thinking, as she had no afterthought and she would be in time for dinner. She was annoyed to find the doors fastened, however, so that she had to ring. Mrs. Bolton opened. "Why, there you are, your ladyship. I was beginning to wonder if you'd got lost," she said a little roguishly. "Sir Clifford hasn't asked for you, though he's got Mr. Linley in with him, talking over something. It looks as if they'd stayed to dinner, doesn't it, my lady?" It does rather," said Connie. "Shall I put dinner back a quarter of an hour? That would give you time to dress in comfort. Perhaps you'd better." Mr. Linley was the general manager of the Colliers, an elderly man from the north with not quite enough punch to suit Clifford, not up to post-war conditions, nor post-war Colliers either, with their canny creed. But Connie liked Mr. Linley, though she was glad to be spared the toad-in of his wife. Linley stayed to dinner, and Connie was the hostess men like so much, so modest, yet so attentive and aware, with big, wide blue eyes, amid a soft repose that sufficiently hid what she was really thinking. Connie had played this woman so much. It was almost second nature to her, but still, decidedly second. Yet it was curious how everything disappeared from her consciousness while she played it. She waited patiently till she could go upstairs and think her own thoughts. She was always waiting. It seemed to be her forte. Once in a room, however, she felt still vague and confused. She didn't know what to think. What sort of a man was he, really? Did he really like her? Not much, she felt. Yet he was kind. There was something, a sort of warm, naive kindness, curious and sudden, that almost opened her wound to him. But she felt he might be kind like that to any woman, though even so it was curiously soothing, comforting. And he was a passionate man, wholesome and passionate. But perhaps he wasn't quite individual enough. He might be the same with any woman as he had been with her. It really wasn't personal. She was only really a female to him. But perhaps that was better. And after all, he was kind to the female in her, which no man had ever been. Men were very kind to the person she was, but rather cruel to the female, despising her or ignoring her altogether. Men were awfully kind to Constance Reed or to Lady Chatterley, but not to her womb. They weren't kind. And he took no notice of Constance or of Lady Chatterley. He just softly stroked her loins or her breast. She went to the wood next day. It was a grey, still afternoon, with the dark green dog's mercury spreading under the hazel copse, and all the trees making a silent effort to open their buds. Today she could almost feel it in her own body, the huge heave of the sap and the massive trees upwards, up to the bud, there to push into little flamey oak leaves, bronze as blood. It was like a ride running turgid upwards and spreading on the sky. She came to the clearing, but he was not there. She had only half expected him. The pheasant chicks were running lightly abroad, light as insects. from the coops where the fellow hens clucked anxiously. Connie sat and watched them and waited. She only waited. Even the chicks she hardly saw. She waited. The time passed with dream-like slowness, and he did not come. She had only half expected him. He never came in the afternoon. She must go home to tea, but she had to force herself to leave. As she went home, a fine drizzle of rain fell. "Is it raining again?" said Clifford, seeing her shake her hat. "Oh, just drizzle." She poured tea in silence, absorbed in a sort of obstinacy. She did not want to see the keeper today, to see if it were really real. If it were really real. "Shall I read a little to you afterwards?" said Clifford. She looked at him. Had he sensed something? "The spring makes me feel queer. I thought I might rest a little," she said. "Just as you like. Not feeling really unwell, are you?" "No, only tired. Only rather tired. With the spring. Will you have Mrs. Bolton to play something with you?" "No, I think I'll listen in." She heard the curious satisfaction in his voice. She went upstairs to her bedroom. There she heard the loudspeaker begin to bellow in an idiotically velveteen, genteel sort of voice. Something about a series of street cries, the very cream of genteel affectation, imitating old criers. She pulled on her old violet-coloured mackintosh and slipped out of the house at the side door. The drizzle of rain was like a veil over the world, mysterious, hushed, not cold. She got very warm as she hurried across the park. She had to open her light waterproof. The wood was silent, still and secret in the even drizzle of rain, full of the mystery of eggs and half-open buds, half-unsheeted flowers. In the dimness of it all, trees glistened naked and dark, as if they had unclothed themselves, and the green things on earth seemed to hum with greenness. There was still no one at the clearing. The chicks had nearly all gone under the mother's hens. Only one or two last adventurous ones still dibbed about in the dryness under the straw roof shelter. And they were doubtful of themselves. So he still had not been. He was staying away on purpose. Or perhaps something was wrong. Perhaps she should go to the cottage and see. But she was born to wait. She opened the hut with her key. It was all tidy. The corn put in the bin. The blankets folded on the shelf. The straw neat in the corner, a new bundle of straw. The hurricane lamp hung on a nail. The table and chair had been put back where she had lain. She sat down on a stool in the doorway. How still everything was. The fine rain blew very softly, flimly, but the wind made no noise. Nothing made any sound. The trees stood like powerful beings, dim, dwilt, silent and alive. How alive everything was. Night was drawing near again. She would have to go. He was avoiding her. But suddenly he came, striding into the clearing, in his black oilskin jacket like a chauffeur, shining with wet. He glanced quickly at the hut, half saluted, then veered aside and went on to the coops. There he crouched in silence, looking carefully at everything, then carefully shutting the hens and chicks up safe against the night. At last he came slowly towards her. She still sat on her stool. He stood before her, under the porch. "You come then," he said, using the intonation of the dialect. "Yes," she said, looking up at him. "You're late." "Aye," he replied, looking away into the wood. She rose slowly, drawing aside her stool. "Did you want to come in?" she asked. He looked down at her shrewdly. "Won't folks be thinking something you come in here every night?" he said. "Why?" She looked up at him at a loss. "I said I'd come. Nobody knows." "They soon will, though," he replied. "And what then?" She was at a loss for an answer. "Why should they know?" she said. "Folks always does," he said fatally. Her lip quivered a little. "Well, I can't help it," she faltered. "Nay," he said. "You can't help it by not coming, if you want to," he added in a lower tone. "But I don't want to," she murmured. He looked away into the wood and was silent. "But what when folks find out?" he asked at last. "Think about it. Think how lowered you'd feel. One of your husband's servants." She looked up at his averted face. Is it?" she stammered. Is it that you don't want me?" "Think," he said. "Think what if folks find out Sir Clifford and everybody talking?" "Well, I can go away." "Where to?" "Anywhere. I've got money of my own. My mother left me £20,000 in trust, and I know Clifford can't touch it. I can go away." "But happen you don't want to go away?" "Well, yes, I don't care what happens to me." "Aye, you think that. But you'll care. You'll have to care. Everybody has. You've got to remember your ladyship is carrying on with a gamekeeper. It's not as if I was a gentleman. Yes, you'd care. You'd care. I shouldn't. What do I care about my ladyship? I hate it, really. I feel people are jeering every time they say it, and they are. They are. Even you jeer when you say it." "Me?" For the first time, he looked straight at her and into her eyes. "I don't jeer at you," he said. As he looked into her eyes, she saw his own eyes go dark, quite dark, the pupils dilating. "Don't you care about the risk?" he asked in a husky voice. "You should care. Don't care when it's too late." There was a curious warning pleading in his voice. "But I've nothing to lose," she said fretfully. "If you knew what it is, you think I'd be glad to lose it. But are you afraid for yourself?" "Aye," he said briefly. "I am. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of things." "What things?" she asked. He gave a curious backward jerk of his head, indicating the outer world. "Things. Everybody. The lot of them." Then he went down and suddenly kissed her unhappy face. "Nay, I don't care," he said. "Let's have it, and down the rest. But if you was to feel sorry you'd ever done it." "Don't put me off," she pleaded. He put his fingers to her cheek and kissed her again suddenly. "Let me come in then," he said softly, "and take off your mackintosh." He hung up his gun, slipped out of his wet leather jacket and reached for the blankets. "I brought another blanket," he said, "so we can put one over us if you like." "I can't stay long," she said. "Dinner is at 7:30. He looked at her swiftly, then at his watch. "All right," he said. He shut the door and lit a tiny light in the hanging hurricane lamp. "One time, we'll have a long time," he said. He put the blankets down carefully, one folded for her head. Then he sat down a moment on the stool and drew her to him, holding her close with one arm, feeling for her body with his free hand. She heard the catch of his intaken breath as he found her. Under her frail petticoat she was naked. "Eh, what it is to be touched thee," he said, as his fingers caressed the delicate, warm, secret skin of her waist and hips. He put his face down and rubbed his cheek against her belly and against her thighs again and again. And again she wondered a little over the sort of rapture it was to him. She did not understand the beauty he found in her, through touch upon her living secret body, almost the ecstasy of beauty. For passion alone is awake to it, and when passion is dead or absent, then the magnificent throb of beauty is incomprehensible and even a little despicable, warm, live beauty of contact, so much deeper than the beauty of vision. She felt the glide of his cheek on her thighs and belly and buttocks, and the close brushing of his moustache and his soft, thick hair, and her knees began to quiver. Far down in her she felt a new stirring, a new nakedness emerging, and she was half afraid. Half she wished he would not caress her so. He was encompassing her somehow, yet she was waiting. And when he came into her, with an intensification of relief and consummation that was pure peace to him, still she was waiting. She felt herself a little left out, and she knew partly it was her own fault. She willed herself into this separateness. Now perhaps she was condemned to it. She lay still, feeling his motion within her, his deep sunk intentness, the sudden quiver of him at the springing of his seed, then the slow subsiding thrust, that thrust of the buttocks. Surely it was a little ridiculous. If you were a woman and a part in all the business, surely that thrusting of the man's buttocks was supremely ridiculous. Surely the man was intensely ridiculous in this posture and this act. But she lay still without recoil. Even when he had finished, she did not rouse herself to get a grip of her own satisfaction as she had done with Michaelese. She lay still, and the tears slowly filled and ran from her eyes. He lay still too, but he held her close and tried to cover her poor naked legs with his legs to keep them warm. He lay on her with a close, undoubting warm. "Are you cold?" he asked in a soft, small voice, as if she were close, so close, whereas she was left out, distant. "No, but I must go," she said gently. He sighed, held her closer, then relaxed to rest again. He had not guessed her tears. He thought she was there with him. "I must go," she repeated. He lifted himself, kneeled beside her a moment, kissed the inner side of her thighs, then drew down her skirts, buttoning his own clothes unthinking, not even turning aside in the faint light from the lantern. "I must come here to the cottage one time," he said, looking down at her with a warm, sure, easy face. But she lay there inert and was gazing up at him thinking, stranger, stranger. She even resented him a little. Ah, listen to the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Listen to the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover with me, Morel Benard. See you then.